Hi, this is Jen Rubin for The Contrarian. I have with me one of our star founding contributors, Joyce Vance. Joyce, welcome.
Hey Jen, how you doing?
I am so glad to have you, and I
It's
want
a
to read
slow
it.
news day, right?
I know this whole week it's just been, nothing doing. I want to remind our audience that beginning next week, we are going to be featuring Joyce Vance's Democracy Tracker. It is such a fabulous project that we have. Joyce, can you tell us just a little bit about what it is and what our readers, viewers are going to get to see?
Right. So this is a project that's been in the works for a while. It's based on our understanding that during the first Trump administration, all of the bad stuff that happened was overwhelming, and people found it impossible to focus to understand what the most important things that were happening to our democracy were, just because there was so much stuff smacking you in the face every day that people could not keep up. So, our goal is to have a group of experts in their areas who will look at events as they happen. We will funnel it and we will try to present once a week a short form version of the most important things you need to know about your democracy. And then over time, we'll develop through lines. So people will actually feel, with a very minimal investment of time, maybe 5 or 10 minutes on a Saturday afternoon, that you are up to speed and understand what's going on.
That is great. There is nothing like this out there, and I think it is sorely needed. And we cannot just chase the shiny object, as you and I have talked many times over the recent days and weeks. Let me start with just a few of the developments today. It's really is a mind-blowing parade, a blur of issues and events. Today, we got a ruling from the United States Supreme Court on TikTok. Could you briefly summarize what that is and what that means, at least for the balance of the Biden term?
So, technically, what it means is that as of Sunday, TikTok is no more. Um, but of course, that's not what it really means in practice for a couple of different reasons. So, it's important to know that last year, Congress passed a statute and it designated several countries, in essence, persona non grata because of their activities that were hostile towards Americans, and said that they couldn't be in charge of apps that Americans were using. It's not TikTok specific, although it's presented that way a lot of the time. China was one of 3 or 4 countries that were designated. And ByteDance, the parent company for TikTok, is Chinese. In China, they do things differently than we do them. For one thing, in China, China has access to companies' data. And so they're able to force TikTok to turn over data about users. That might seem benign. A lot of our data is farmed by various companies that have online platforms. But in this case, it's really troubling because we know that China is not a good player on the international spectrum. And so, for instance, there are concerns that this data could be used to try to influence American opinion on important issues like elections or other sorts of issues, and also that it could be used to compromise American citizens in ways that might force them or make them blackmailable to support Chinese interests. So that was sort of the rationale for the law. TikTok and some of its content creators said, wait a second, this violates our First Amendment rights. And so that's what this opinion today is about. The Supreme Court doesn't really decide the issue of whether the First Amendment is impacted. They say, we're going to bypass that issue. We're going to assume the First Amendment applies for purposes of this. And we're going to use what's called intermediate scrutiny and say that because the government has said important national security concerns are behind this law, it is okay. It passes muster under the First Amendment. And that means the TikTok ban is on as of Sunday. But wait, Joe Biden has said, I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to, it's a Sunday for one thing. It's not a business day. I'm going to wait and let the Trump administration, which takes over at noon on Monday, handle this. And Donald Trump, who interestingly enough, when he was in office, not a fan of TikTok, found it to be very useful during the election. And because he is by nature transactional, it now appears that he wants to find a path forward for TikTok.
And by transactional, you mean it has no fixed principles and will do whatever he thinks in the moment will benefit him politically and economically.
Yeah, what
Now,
you said, Jen.
yeah, exactly. So when they say a ban, it is not as if it would disappear off of your phone. What does a ban really mean, even if it would go into effect?
Yeah, so this is a great point. The way the law operates is that anybody who's posting or offering TikTok, let's say the App Store, right? They're fined every day per user. The amounts will get astronomical on the first day. And so the enforcement mechanism was really this very clever mechanism of getting the companies to take TikTok off of their sites, off of their platforms, to no longer host TikTok. Um, and the companies now are in a little bit of a gray area. The Supreme Court has said the law can be enforced. Biden has said we are not going to start assessing penalties on Sunday. It appears that Trump might do something like the 90-day pause that he's maybe authorized to do under law. That's a close call. But it really does leave companies in legal limbo. So we may see, I think, to probably the happiness of every parent in America, a little bit less TikTok in the coming week. Look, personally, I actually don't use it very heavily because when I was at DOJ, we had such strong national security concerns about it. I only have it on one device, and even then, I don't use it unless my friend Katie Fang is sending me really good dog videos. But I think that a lot of people are going to find their addiction as not being fed perhaps as easily as it once was.
Right. And we have had a campaign based on the contrarian of TikTok users and developers and artists who very strongly object to this and want to maintain this as a creative space. So, as we wrap up on this issue, talk to us a little bit about this strange conflict. We have a statute, a law that Congress has passed, the president had signed. What is the power of the president simply to say, never mind the law? And what assurance do individual companies or platforms that are hosting this have that they won't wind up in peril because the law is on the books?
Yeah, so girl, have you met Donald Trump? I mean,
Yeah.
you know, there's some legal hooks here he could use. For instance, if TikTok said that they had a deal to sell the company into American ownership, that would give him the ability to pause while that deal went through. There's also arguably sort of an administrative ability to set a 90-day pause. Whether or not somebody might go to court to challenge that if he did it, we're going to watch all of this sort of play out in real time. So the problem is, what do you do if you're a company? You know, if I was the general counsel of one of these companies, I would say we cannot run the risk. We don't know. Donald Trump might decide on Tuesday to assess fines. We would have 3 days added up in this enormous financial liability. We're going to have to stop hosting for now. That's the precarious position this leaves American businesses in.
And I want to underscore something that is very important in what you said. In an authoritarian structure, because power is used arbitrarily, Trump could decide, I'm going to enforce it against this company because they gave me campaign donations and they're saying nice things. And I am not going to enforce it against somebody else. So it's the arbitrary use of power that in an
But don't you think
authoritarian.
if that happened, there would be challenges in court, right? There would be due process charges. But to your point, when you have someone who's willing to use power in that sort of a baseless way, that's the risk that you're looking at. How will he try to deploy his power until it's challenged in court?
Absolutely. And we're going to come across these rule of law and uneven enforcement and retaliatory enforcement of laws, I think, for the next 4 years, unfortunately. Let's shift to another legal development, and that was Biden issued a commutation, not a pardon, but a commutation for about 2,500 people. Tell us what that is, and as a former prosecutor, how you feel in general about commutations or pardons for people who, after all, were duly convicted of whatever crime.
Well, this is part of the ongoing legacy of President Biden's work as vice president in the Obama administration, when there was a commitment to redressing old wrongs in the criminal justice system. In this case, this tranche of pardons has been issued for people who, if they were sentenced today, would not have received the gargantuan sentences that they reached back when they were sentenced. And so he has commuted. He's not pardoning them. They're still convicted for these crimes, but he's shortening their sentences to reflect more modern views about sentencing. It's an effort to right size the criminal justice system. I think it's absolutely appropriate. The pardon power should be used to do mercy and to do justice. That's what Joe Biden did today.
And what are the kinds of people that would be affected by that? Who are in that group of 2,500 people?
So these are nonviolent drug offenders, many of them first-time offenders who got swooped up in very unforgiving laws that put them in prison for 20 years for life for relatively minimal crimes. A lot of this, over time, we've simply seen laws and sentencing guidelines shift. Sometimes there are groups of people, because of the year or the time frame where they were sentenced, they don't receive the benefit of changes in laws. And so you have disparate sentences that are unfair, that just are in place for no good reason. That's what the president fixed today.
Well, we have yet to see, as we are taping this, whether, first of all, Biden will issue any pardons for people who are targeted by Donald Trump for either participation in the investigation of January 6th, or because they've said nasty things about him, or because they were part of the Russian hoax. And we will also see, quite frankly, come Monday, whether Donald Trump uses the pardon power to, of all things, pardon the violent criminals who were convicted on January 6th. These were people, some of whom attacked police officers, did violent action on the Capitol Hill, destroyed federal property. And we are about to, I think, see between these two events the really massive power, the plenary power of the pardon that gives presidents very, very broad discretion. And it is one of the reasons why we have to elect a president whose values, whose moral character we trust. This is such a vast power that in the hands of someone who is unprincipled, self-interested, wants to do harm, frankly, to our democratic values, can be very, very dangerous. So we will look forward to seeing that and watching that with you, Joyce. Thank you so much for being part of the Contrarian family. I cannot wait to see the Democracy Tracker. And welcome to the next 4 years.
Glad I'm going to be spending it with you, Jen.
Take care.
Bye.